Hello everyone, my name is Tatiana, and for my drama oral presentation I chose to do it on Zoot. So basically the Zoot riots play and also the movie that we were instructed to watch throughout the unit. So basically if you haven't seen the Zoot or if you haven't read the play, it is by Luis Valdez, and it basically describes the real events of the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial. It involves a young group of Mexican Americans who were charged with murder and who were charged and unfairly prosecuted with murder. It The main character is Henry Reyna, and he is a Pachuco gangster, and he's basically a gang member. He is thrown in jail for the murder that he is thrown. Henry is thrown in jail for a murder that he did not commit. Um, this story timeline, it took place in Los Angeles, and it was around the early 1940s, and it was basically um, against the backdrops of the Zoot Suit riot and kind of like World War II. Edward James Olmos, he was portrayed as El Pachuco inside of the play, and he was basically an idealized Zoot Suiter. He served as that, and also he served as Henry's conscience throughout the the play and also the movie. I chose this particular play and movie because I just felt like it was so interesting. It was something that I didn't know about until until this class and until this unit and until I did a lot of my own research on it. So I didn't know a lot about it, and I feel like it was very interesting, and I feel like I wanted to go deeper and explain, and talk to you guys about it. So that's why I chose to do this oral presentation on. The theme that I'm going to be focusing on the most is probably the social and ethical conflicts, because I feel like that was a very vivid and what this play and what this movie portrays. So it was directed by Luis Valdez, and I felt like it was basically showing the separation between the Mexican American youth and between the dominant white people, and more specifically the dominant policemen. So, with that being said, I'm just going to explain what a zoot suit is. So, zoot suits around that time was something that made the youth feel cool. Like how nowadays we have different things that make us seem cool or whatever if we dress a certain way or whatever the case may be. It's something that makes you seem cool. So, a zoot suit was basically borrowed from the American culture, and it consisted of a wide pants leg and a long suit jacket. So many teenagers wore these suits, and most of them were not supported by their parents, only because they, their parents felt like they added an extra layer of cultural animosity, in a sense. Like, it was basically for them to stand out or for them to act rebellious when all their parents wanted them to do was go along with Mexican tradition and things of that nature. They didn't want them to drift off and become Americanized, and they wanted them to be traditional and be like they were. But most of the youth that we've seen in the play and the movie, they wanted to be independent, they wanted to do their own thing, and they wanted to be rebellious against society standards of how Mexican youth was supposed to act, and also their own parents' traditional and moral values that they set in place for them to act as. They wanted to just do their own thing. So it was a lot of onlookers that seeing these youth and seeing the way that they behaved and stuff like that, and most of them were the white people that didn't like it, that had the most to say about it, just because it, like I said earlier, went against society standards. I think that the social conflict streamed from the segregation toward the Mexican American youth slash gangs by the white people. So the two races were separated, and they resented each other. And around that time, gangs were very prevalent. They were there. So a lot of white people also didn't like the fact that most of the Mexican youth were in gangs. That was the biggest thing. So in the Zoot Suits, what we learned was that the gangs were called called, sorry if I mess this up, I really don't know how to say this. I think it was Pachuchos. There was a lot of conflicts in the sense because a lot of white people were just like, we need you gone. Like, if you're just going to be in gangs and stuff like that, you're not adding any benefit to our society and our community, so we need you gone. But in actuality, a lot of the teenagers they weren't given a chance, really. In my opinion, they were not given a chance. Most of them didn't speak Spanish. Most of them were very Americanized because they grew up, in LA. This took place in LA. They grew up in LA, so a lot of what they've witnessed was Americanized. They weren't in their hometown; they weren't in Mexico, so that's what they grew up as. So their parents wanted them to be more traditional, wanted them to be more. They wanted them to speak Spanish. They wanted them to do things related to Mexican culture, but because the society that they grew up in, it was kind of hard for them to do that. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to be more Americanized. They wanted to fit in. They wanted to be in gangs. They wanted to wear zoot suits. These were the things that they were participating in. These are the things that they were inspired by, despite society's expectations of them to act a certain different way. So I feel like that's a lot of where the social conflicts comes from, just because these youth wanted to be rebellious instead of listen. I feel like white people didn't appreciate the gangs parading through LA, and this is why there was a greater separation. So a lot of the police were aimed toward, breaking these up, finding the gangs, putting these young kids in jail. So finally, the teenagers that were, the main characters that were very involved, they got arrested and they got sent to prison. So eventually, these Pachuco gang members, which included, a lot of Mexican youth, they were arrested and charged and prosecuted and charged with murder. It was known as the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial, and they were prosecuted unfairly. So, what the goal was basically throughout the plays and the movies and stuff like that was to get them out of jail because they were prosecuted unfairly. They were trying to, create a case to better the chances of getting out. So, a lot of what it was didn't trust these men because they were gay members, but also because they were believed to be dirty. They were, unrepresented because they weren't viewed as what society would deem as somebody that was wholesome. They viewed them as totally different because of the family and background that they came from, and because they feel like they were dirty and shaggy. They didn't have haircuts and stuff like that. So it was a lot of things that went into the trial and the decision of the trial. So I think that is where that ethical conflict started coming in, because a lot of what was going on was unethical and it was unmoral. Like the whole trial and the whole prosecution between those young people was very unethical. The youth were being underrepresented because of the way that they looked, because of different things that come from. It was basically like a lot of stereotyping going on. And the views between the white people and the views between the Mexicans, they just had different cultural views. They had different cultural views that had different ethical views, and they also had different social views. So during this prosecution, during these Mexican Americans being imprisoned, they were denied civil rights. They were denied the opportunity of the opportunity of an ethical interview, and somebody to actually talk to them, somebody to actually, get their side of the story. They were denied all of these rights. They were also just forced to be displayed as people that were disheveled and shabby, and that was it. It was like their way, the white dominant people's way, or the highway. It wasn't like the Mexican American youth had the opportunity to portray themselves or explain or talk and tell their side of it. So I feel like that's another social problem, because it has a lot to do with how white people are dominant, and that was shown. And I feel like that's a very very big conflict that I feel like we need to pay closer attention to. So Henry was able to be released, and at the end of it all, it was a very exciting moment for everybody that was working with him, to just give him the opportunity to have a fair trial. So what I have to say is learning about what Mexican Americans face really opened my eyes to the injustice injustice that America displays back then and also now, because not a lot has changed. Like I said before, different minorities, especially African Americans, Latinos, all of them, they're being very segregated against, and I feel like they're denied their rights in a lot of in a lot of situations. I just feel like overall, as a whole, that shows a lot of where our society stands and where our world as a whole stands right now. Those are some of the social and ethical things that I found wrong in the Zoot Suit riots, the Zoot Suit play, and also the movie. So I hope this was beneficial to you guys. I hope I explained a lot. I hope that you understood most of what I said. And thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.